The temple keeper stood beside Garrett within the confines of the ancient pagan temple. A grey stone altar lay before them, the woodsy emerald situated atop.
Lady of the Woodsies, Mistress of the Trees, chosen child, our last mother, our last hope.
The last words of the ancient pagan rite uttered, the elder turned his sights on the thief, watching as he produced a 6-inch dagger.
Human, before we begin, I need to know, are you truly devoted to the last mother, the one you called Guinevere?
I'm participating in a pagan ritual willingly in order to save her life. I'd say that's a pretty damn good sign.
He snapped.
Then I suppose that it can't be helped.
He shook his head with a hopeless sigh.
You don't seem too pleased, old man.
I'm not. Why can't you see it, man fool?
The eyes of the temple keeper began to glow a sickening green as the beast within made itself known, however fleeting.
See what?
Garrett retorted bravely.
The last mother. She's been in the darkness so long, tricked into believing that she belongs within your wretched human world of smoke and iron. If these delusions are allowed to fester unchecked for much longer.
What? What's the big secret?
The thief huffed, toying impatiently with the tip of his blade.
Do not be afraid of the knowledge you have gained, human. She is not a deity, at least not yet. Her powers are great, yet they are just a tiny glance at what she will eventually become.
The elder ground his teeth in the direction of the outsider.
But I can sense your feelings for her, and what I initially interpreted as loyalty to you out of sheer folly, now I see for what it truly is.
Just get to the point.
The last mother is fighting against herself. She yearns to be mortal, to be human, no doubt. She mistakes her instincts for voices in her head or demons.
Garrett's eyes widened at these familiar words. Guinevere had spoken of being possessed by demons. Were these demons? These voices that told her to maim and slaughter? Had they been just a part of her all along? And if so, how could she not know?
Why would she do that? Why abandon what she is? What could she possibly have to gain?
It's simple. You.
Garrett recoiled at the elder's accusation.
What?
He gaped. Although he acted surprised, a part of him already knew that this was indeed the case. Guinevere loved him. She had even told him so, although he had yet to return such powerful words. The thief cringed at the thought. He did love Guinevere, but
if she chooses a life with you, yes, she shall lose her power and gain the soul of a mortal. But if this happens, the days of the pagan ways will end, and so too shall the forest.
Garrett gawked at him. It all made sense now. Those vivid nightmares of pagan voices and death. Victoria telling no, threatening him not to taint Guinevere. These had been the last resorts of a dying religion, a fading legacy.
Guinevere has already made her choice. She wants to help the city. She has devoted herself to my teachings and become my apprentice.
He informed possessively. To his surprise, the temple keeper appeared neither enraged nor disappointed. Instead, he stood before the thief, his last forlorn expression fading into history.
I had hoped that it would not be this way, but I should have known better. Our days have been long over. Ever since the genocide those damned mechanists committed, I thought with the power of the last mother, maybe we could regroup. Her power could have turned your metal city to dust, man fool.
The elder roared, his level, sage-like voice now demented and guttural. His tone shifted back to normal a moment later, and a deep sadness coated his tongue.
But now?
Now, she's free to carve her own destiny.
Garrett finished the elder's speech.
And I'm not about to let such noble efforts be in vain.
Before the temple keeper could object, the thief sliced a deep gash into his left hand. A fountain of warm burgundy splattered across the altar and the woodsy emerald. Using the thin folds of his black cloak, the thief cleaned his dagger and sheathed it. He stared down at his wound for a moment. Fresh blood receded down his arm like a grisly river, and the pagan relic began to glow. A cold wind whipped across the forest, taking the last of Garrett's nagging doubts about Guinevere with it. This sacrifice had been more than just a means to save her life. It had been an unspoken covenant of his devotion and love for her. Guinevere slowly came to, still floating in her bath of lilies and tiny fish. Several koi swam past her, nipping at the strands of her red satin hair floating lazily in their domain. She rubbed her dirty face with the cold water, feeling as her strength began to return. It had been weeks since the young woman had been given a chance to bathe like this, and it felt so good. Hidden in the shadows of the enchanted trees, the moonlight illuminated the recovering nymph and gleamed off the tips of the ancient branches. Guinevere breathed slowly and closed her eyes, thinking of Garrett. The moonlight glistened off the surface of the lake, distorted by the ripples as she swam in the cool night. She was so deep in thought that she didn't hear the soft footsteps coming from behind her.
It would appear that the ritual has been a success.
The temple keeper addressed her. Guinevere spun around in the lake, water spray catching the moonbeams like dazzling crystals.
His blood has awakened you.
What? What are you talking about?
She asked, a bit nervously. The elder stood in silence for a moment, then slowly closed his eyes.
The human you have taken so much interest in, he offered up his own blood to save your life.
Guinevere was mortified.
Garrett? Is he?
She froze. Although the unmistakable power of a deity flowed through her veins, not a cell in her body had the strength to ask that question.
Do not fear, milady. This particular ritual did not call for very much sacrificial blood.
Guinevere felt her posture untense at his reply.
Where is he then?
She shook the remaining water from her hair. The green in her irises spun and twisted with the golden edges.
He waits for you within the heart of the forest. He said that he needed to speak with you alone.
Guinevere smiled a gracious thanks to the temple keeper, before darting off to see just what it was her savior wanted. On her way, she couldn't help but chuckle.
Damn it all, Garrett. You've got to stop saving me all the time, else I'll never be able to repay you.
She found him just where the temple guardian had promised, right in the heart of the wood. The thief's gaze was directed up towards the vast sea of stars overhead. He was positively exhausted, yet for some reason, Garrett found that he couldn't turn his eyes away from the heavenly beacons. They seemed to be pulling at him, searching the unseen shadows of his being, testing his soul.
Garrett?
Guinevere approached. Garrett finally looked away from the celestial bodies, at the beckoning of her sweet voice. Fireflies illuminated the tall grass beneath her toes in a twinkling hue of neon. The nymph's senses grew uncertain when she noticed the bandaging on her thief's hand. No doubt that the injury had been caused during the ritual. Self-inflicted. Her body cringed.
Are you alright?
She blurted, completely forgetting her entire reason for being there. All she could think of now was the injury he had endured to save her life. A small grin found the thief's parched lips.
You're the one who nearly died. I should be asking you.
He replied, trying not to let his over-exuberance of seeing Guinevere on her feet get the better of him. A lone wolf howled in the distance as the nymph strode to his side. She looked up at her savior. He towered over her by almost half a foot, yet his presence had never been frightening for her. Guinevere recalled the night she had first met Garrett, how he had snuck up on her in that dark alley. Even then, she had never felt afraid of him. She couldn't say why, but he had always projected an air of safety and guardianship. She blushed, thinking about how silly she would sound if he knew her precise thoughts. For through their countless ordeals and trials together, Garrett had become more than just her teacher, her lover. He had become her hero. Picking up on her deep thoughts, the thief touched her shoulder. Guinevere gasped silently when she felt his hand tremble as it graced her soft flesh. She looked up into his eyes. They were tired, no doubt about that, but also flooded with relief and contentment.
And I'm glad you are.
He smiled.
Likewise.
She closed her eyes in joy. Garrett turned away from her, a firm frown replacing his tender expression.
I wouldn't say that.
What? Why?
Casting his eyes back up to the swirling galaxies of sparkling alabaster, the thief maintained his disdain.
I can't go back to the city for a long time, if ever.
What happened?
Garrett stared at her. Of course she would ask that. She was a forest creature with the blissful innocence of a sheltered child. She had no idea how the world outside these enchanted woods worked, or what the consequences of her actions would spell. A large part of Garrett was beyond proud by said actions, despite the trouble they had caused him. Since the night he had first met the thief-taker general, the bastard had been a thorn in his side. The thought of what he would have undoubtedly put the thief through that eve, should Guinevere not disobeyed and followed him. He subconsciously rubbed his hand. The bone-shattering agony would have been just the beginning of that sadist's bout of torture. But the forest nymph had shown up to turn the tables. And turned the tables, she had.
Guinevere, the man you killed that night.
Uh-huh. What about him?
Guinevere smiled with genuine glee. This disturbed Garrett, in light of what he had recently learned about her. Did she actually enjoy what she had done? If she was anything like her father.
No. Guinevere doesn't even know what she is, where she descends from. She would never kill for pleasure.
Garrett shook his head violently. It surprised him how much he was defending her lately, guarding her as if she were a precious stone. His precious stone. Garrett knew every treasure in his collection well, including Guinevere, for she was his most cherished prize.
No, she's not the trickster. She's barely Victoria.
His mind once again put at ease, he released a pent-up sigh. While Guinevere was indeed as dangerous as her parents, there was one trait which she did not share with either of them. Guinevere wanted to help everyone. Not just the pagans. Not just herself. Not just him. Everyone. She was a selfless creation, foredoomed with godlike power.
Garrett, you okay?
Her voice teased at his eardrums as a soft breeze caught the thief's cloak. Garrett locked eyes with her and smiled again.
Just thinking about something.
Oh?
Guinevere cocked her head.
None of that matters. At least, not at the moment.
He stepped closer to her. Removing his billowing cloak, he gingerly draped it over her chilled body. Guinevere blinked with a giggle as he pulled the attached hood up over her still moist hair.
Not sure if forest nymphs can catch cold, but I'm not willing to take any chances.
He spoke solemnly, as his large hands caressed downwards over the length of her petite form. The thief held the shuddering nymph against his body, feeling as she locked her legs around his. The night felt soothing, despite the frigid chill in the air. The two were warm within the confines of a small cave, protected from the ice and snow by mossy limestone walls and dripping stalactites. There was a relaxing heat wafting through the confine, coming from an unseen hot spring just below the surface. Garrett's mind was still riddled with turbulence. His place, nay, his identity, was in the city. Yet returning would be no easy task. In time, perhaps after the heat died down, he could return to his life of hoarding treasures and stalking the night. He glanced down at Guinevere, listening to the gentleness of her breathing pattern. In time. For now, he was exactly where he wanted to be.
Garrett?
She suddenly spoke, nearly startling him.
I thought you were asleep. What is it, my Guinevere?
You mentioned that man I killed earlier?
The thief's chest tensed.
Yes, what of him?
Guinevere stared up into his bicolored eyes, anxious. Her expression was troubled, and Garrett knew that her thoughts were causing her much turmoil.
Guinevere?
He asked with concern when she did not respond.
Garrett? Am I...
Are you what, Guinevere?
His hot breath found her ear as he coaxed, tracing his index finger down the base of her neck. Her body jittered with pleasure and lust. How she loved it when he did that. But pleasure was soon replaced by a great hollowness. A feeling of deep terror that would rival even the greatest of mortal fears.
Am I a bad person? Am I an abomination for what I did to him?
As the words left her burgundy lips, the little nymph began to tremble. Instantly, Garrett pulled her into him, letting her tears bathe his defined chest.
Shh, Guinevere.
He stroked her hair, taking the time to feel each wavy ruby strand as it fell from his fingers.
You shouldn't speak of yourself like that.
But Garrett! I ripped him apart! I made him suffer so!
Believe me, he had it coming.
I wish I could.
She sniffed.
But deep down, I know that no one deserves to die like that. What I did was monstrous. I told you once before that I don't agree with everything the pagans do. The blood sacrifices, the senseless slaughter of outsiders. I never wanted any part of any of it.
She shrieked. Garrett felt as if an unseen cold finger reached out and tapped him in the chest at her words. She didn't want her fate, yet could such power be ignored? Even by choice, could Guinevere ever truly deny herself? The thief managed an ironic smirk. Could anyone?
I still remember what I was thinking when I saw him drag you away. I told myself that after he left, I would just untie you and we would escape.
She gulped down a foul mixture of angry tears and remorse.
But he didn't leave. He hurt you. And when I heard you scream like that...
Garrett held her tighter, now rocking her slightly.
I know. It's all right, Guinevere. You did the right thing.
He comforted. To his shock, she violently pulled free of his embrace. Her green eyes burned like torches.
No, Garrett! You can't just trivialize it like that. Killing is never the answer. If it wasn't for that damn demon inside my head, if it hadn't told me to end his life...
Then the thief-taker general would have killed you. He would have tortured me, and then I would have hung come dawn.
He interrupted her. Guinevere's eyes now laid locked within his. As the wisdom of his statement sank in, Garrett continued.
I don't like killing either, Guinevere. I never have. My family.
He stopped short, hot breath finding his nostrils.
Garrett.
Intrigued, Guinevere touched his exposed leg.
What happened to them?
She felt the hairs of his calf stand on end at her question. Garrett took a deep breath. He had told her so many things pertaining to his life. Things that no soul, living or dead, had ever heard uttered from his lips. Speaking freely, or administering truths, were non-existent for him. Before this creature had entered his world.
They were murdered by the Hammerites.
Guinevere felt her heart go cold. The Hammerites, or Hammerheads as her people called them, were a religious group that sought to carry out the vision of the Master Builder, their god. In their prime, they had also been the driving force of progress within the city. They represented order, and zealously enforced the tenets of their faith. Part of this meant a ceaseless strife against criminals and other lawbreakers, including thieves.
Why would they kill your parents?
She asked, positively horrified. Garrett choked back deep anguish and took a cleansing breath.
I don't remember much about my childhood. I vaguely recall having an older brother, but the memory is hazy at best. I know that my father was involved in some sort of smuggling operation down by the docks. Apparently the Hammers didn't approve of whatever it was he was transporting.
What happened?
One night, while we all slept, there was a loud banging at the door. It sounded like volatile thunder, mixed with pure hatred. I could still hear the bellowing voices knocking in my ears.
It was them, wasn't it?
Guinevere asked. The thief slowly nodded his head.
I remember being shuffled into a basement by my mother's hands. I remember cowering, too frightened to even breathe, as the loud footsteps trampled overhead. There was a scream, a struggle.
His voice trembled.
And then... silence. Dead silence.
Guinevere crawled close to him and wrapped her arms around his neck. She graced the cheek of her beloved thief. He remained stiff in her arms.
Garrett, I had no idea.
Was all that she could say.
So, is that why you despise killing?
In part.
Garrett fell silent until the last streaks of the winter storm were replaced by the cool grays of early morning.
Guinevere, what you did was justified. While I don't believe that people are inherently good, I do believe that most deserve life. Most.
He looked down at her. The nymph watched him speak, captivated by his every word.
Garrett, have you ever killed anyone?
Yes.
When was the last time?
Garrett stared at her, a look of firm intent blazing within his metal eye.
Guinevere, I need to level with you. Do you remember that guard from the House of Blossoms? The one who tried to...
He stopped himself when he noticed the discomfort filling her face. Guinevere shook like an autumn leaf, caught up in a vile tornado. How could she ever forget?
Why are you bringing him up now?
She asked, upset by the memory. Garrett gave her a knowing, solemn nod. Her eyes flashed.
But you told me that you just knocked him out.
She stammered.
I just didn't want to upset you. But like the general, that watchdog had it coming. He should have never touched you like that.
The thief snarled, clenching his teeth. Guinevere tapped him again.
The point is, while some of us scrape by, there are others who deserve to be scraped away, Guinevere.
I think I understand.
I'm not quick to admit it, but I have made a lot of mistakes in my time. We all have. But when you choose to better yourself, be it by your craft or by your skill, eventually said mistakes actually end up proving beneficial.
How so?
Well, you won't make them again, that's for damn sure.
He grinned mischievously.
Garrett, I am honored to be your apprentice.
Guinevere proclaimed out of nowhere. Garrett smiled and kissed her on her forehead.
You do me proud.